Japan, a magical island nation, immediately conjures images of samurai and Japanese swords, tea ceremonies, cherry blossoms, Mount Fuji, geisha, sumo wrestling, Shinkansen bullet trains, cars, and temples in our mind. It's a blend of violence and beauty, tradition and modernity. And what's even more intriguing is the fusion of foreign Buddhism and native Shinto beliefs into the national faith. Most Japanese people simultaneously venerate both Shinto and Buddhism, and the rituals of these two religions have long been integrated into Japanese life. Japanese New Year. In the past, when a lunar calendar was used, it was kept in February, but today, it is celebrated the 1st to the 6th of January. During this period, businesses close and people gather with their families. Each family purifies and cleans their house in preparation for the new year. On New Year's Eve, special food is eaten and offerings are made to the ancestors. The families visit places of worship. Some go to Buddhist temples, but most go to Shinto shrines. Shinto, a loosely organized native Japanese religion, embraces a wide variety of beliefs and practices. Indeed, the variety is so wide that sometimes it is difficult to define Shinto. Therefore, we can only list some of the areas it covers. In one sense, Shinto is a religious form of Japanese patriotism. Its mythology describes the formation of Japan as a land superior to all other lands. Its shrines commemorate the great heroes and events in the history of Japan. Historically, it has taught the Japanese people that their emperors were descendants of the sun goddess. Shinto involves the Japanese in a worshipful attitude toward the beauties of their land, particularly its mountains and forests. Many Shinto shrines receive the financial support from the government. While most aspects of Shinto are not inherently nationalistic, Japanese nationalists have sometimes used Shinto to emphasize the unique character of Japanese culture. It also includes aspects of animism and ancestor worship. Large-scale, public Shinto rituals take place in shrines throughout Japan. Private family rituals are carried out in small shrines. In Japanese homes, highly organized and active religious sects also have developed from basic Shinto. The word Shinto itself was not officially coined until the 6th century CE. It was developed then to distinguish native Japanese religion from the newer religions, Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism being imported from China and Korea during the period. The word Shinto actually comes from the Chinese words Shen and Tam, which may be roughly translated in this context as the way of the gods. To understand Japanese religion before the 6th century CE, we must look at some of the traditional myths surrounding the origin of Japan, its native gods, and its early history. The major source for our knowledge of Japanese mythology is the Kojiki, Chronicles of Ancient Events. These chronicles were collected in the 7th and 8th centuries CE as a response to the entrance of Chinese culture and religions. The Kojiki includes stories that describe the special creation of the Japanese islands by Takami, Izanagi and his consort, Izanami. These two become the divine parents of the other kami in Japanese mythology. The chief of these spirits is Amaterasu, the sun goddess. All of the Japanese emperors are believed to be descended from the line of Amaterasu. According to mythological tradition, the first Japanese emperor was enthroned in the 7th century B. But most modern scholars agree that the actual history of Japan does not begin until the 3rd century CE. At that point, the Japanese became known to other nations and began to keep historical records. Therefore, Japan's culture is one of the youngest of all of the Asian nations. Chinese influence on Shinto early in its history. Japan became an object of interest to Chinese and Korean merchants and missionaries. These persons brought with them much of the older culture of China, including its arts, language, and system of writing and, of course, its various religions and ethical systems. All of these had a lasting effect on Japanese civilization. Altogether, the period between the 4th and 8th centuries CE was one of dramatic change for Japan. The entrance of Buddhism from China and Korea was extremely important in the development of the religious traditions of Japan. According to the Japanese chronicles, it was in the year 522 CE that the Emperor of Japan was presented with an image of the Buddha and several volumes of Buddhist scripture. Though the emperor was delighted, his advisors warned him that the introduction of a foreign god might arouse the anger of the native kami. Shortly after the introduction of the Buddha, a pestilence broke out in Japan. Fearing that the pestilence was the work of the vengeful kami, the emperor had the statue thrown into a canal. The temple that had been built for the Buddha was burned, whereupon the pestilence ceased. Buddhism could not so easily be turned away from Japan, however. In succeeding generations, other statues of the Buddha were introduced, as well as prayers and rituals. Generally, Japanese life began to be divided into two spheres. The concerns of day-to-day life became the domain of the Shinto side of the religion, and concerns for the afterlife were served by the Buddhists. Thus, a traditional citizen of Japan might be said to have been born a Shintoist, but to have died a Buddhist. For 10 centuries, Shinto and Buddhism lived side by side in Japan, each serving a special need of the people. Buddhism had emphasized meditation jhana as a means of insight into religious truth. The Chinese Buddhists had picked this up through the missionary work of Bodhidharma and called it Chan. The Japanese developed meditative Mahayana Buddhism. Even further under the name Zen, the Japanese also originated or developed other forms of Buddhism, such as Pure Land and Nichiren. These and other forms of Buddhism became so popular in Japan that even though Shinto was intermingled with them, it was almost forgotten as a viable religion for the Japanese people. From the 8th century CE onward, Shinto and Buddhism merged into a syncretistic form of religion, to the point that Shinto almost disappeared as an independent religion. Around the period, a legendary figure, the Chinese monk Zhongzhen from the Tang dynasty, made 6 attempts over more than a decade to cross the sea to Japan to propagate Buddhism. He finally succeeded on his 6th attempt and had a significant impact on the spread of Buddhism in ancient Japan. Nevertheless, reformers often appeared who wished to revise and revitalize the native religion of Japan. As early as the 14th century, various scholars tried to point out the strengths of Shinto and to restore it to its place of prominence with the people. However, it was not until the 17th century and the rise of the Tokugawa regime 1600 to 1867 that Shinto received official support. In this era, the Japanese were unified by tough-minded military leaders who sought to isolate the nation from outside influences. Because Buddhism and Christianity were foreign-born, they were pushed aside. Since Shinto was native to Japan, it was given new strength and support by the national government. A Japanese version of Confucianism was the only foreign system that was allowed support during this period, because Confucian ethics were supportive of the militaristic Tokugawa regime. One of the most colorful aspects of Japanese life during the Tokugawa era was the feudal knight, called samurai. Throughout the history of Japan, individual warriors hired themselves out as bodyguards or mercenary soldiers to lords, but in the Tokugawa era, the samurai was idealized and a code of conduct was established for him. The warrior code known as Bushido, or the way of the fighting knight, is a set of principles that combines Shinto and Confucianism. Similar to the idealized Christian knight of medieval Europe, Bushido emphasizes loyalty, courage, honor, and politeness. Loyalty to one's master is paramount, as illustrated by the story of the 47 Ronin seeking vengeance for their insulted lord. Courage in battle and a willingness to sacrifice one's life for the master are integral aspects of the code. Honor is of utmost importance, with samurai expected to choose death over dishonor. The cultural acceptance of suicide in Japan, particularly through the ritualistic form of seppuku, reflects the emphasis on avoiding dishonor. The description of seppuku involves a slow, painful disembowelment, with recent variations adopting a quicker method, such as beheading. Notably, this form of death is reserved for warriors and nobility, while women and peasants were forbidden from committing seppuku, and were expected to choose faster methods, like stabbing themselves in the throat. In the modern era, Japan's Tokugawa period witnessed a deliberate isolationist stance, avoiding foreign influence by closing its doors to trade, tourism, and foreign religions. However, in 1853, Commodore Perry's arrival forced Japan to open its ports, leading to a rapid pursuit of industrialization to catch up with the world. The Constitution of 1889 established state-supported Shinto for patriotic rituals, allowing coexistence with other religions. Post-1889, state-supported Shinto, known as Jinja, aimed to foster patriotism and it had limited religious functions. State Shinto became intertwined with Japanese militarism, supporting the nation's wars, especially during World War II. After Japan's defeat, the American occupation abolished state support for Shinto, and in 1946, the emperor declared he was not divine. Government-supported shrines survived post-1945 with private support. In the post-World War II era, Shinto faced uncertainty due to the removal of official government support and the rapid industrialization of Japan. With the country quickly embracing modernity, it seemed that the ancient religion might struggle to survive, especially with Buddhism being more widely identified among the Japanese. Despite these challenges, Shinto has not faded away. In fact, it may be as strong as ever in contemporary Japan. Contrary to expectations, Shinto, in its various forms, has remained a significant force in Japanese culture, demonstrating resilience and adaptability in the face of societal and cultural shifts.